Hi, everybody. Welcome. There was someone else to make introductions, but I can introduce myself. My name is AAC24 EUrquieta. I work for the Translational Research Institute for Space Health in Houston, Texas. We work with the NASA Human Research Program, and we have been tasked to find new solutions and new approaches to the highest priority human risks for spaceflight, specifically going back to the moon and eventually going to Mars. I'm also a faculty member at Baylor College of Medicine, both in the Department of Emergency Medicine and Center for Space Medicine. I have some personal experience in analogs. I was part of the Hera 11 mission. I spent 30 days there. And I've been to Antarctica. And the last part of my presentation is going to cover a new agreement that we completed with the Australian Antarctic Division. And I'm going to show what are the key differences between what we traditionally think with McMurdo and the NSF stations, which are more like large cities. And you will see how unique capabilities we have with the Australian Antarctic Division. Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, if you can move to the next one. Okay, so today's talk is going to be about most of the analogs, what types of analogs we have. Traditionally, when someone thinks about an analog, we think about the Hera or HI-SEAS or these analogs that are mostly related to behavior, team dynamics, team composition. But there's all other kinds of analogs that we usually are overseen. And the goal of this talk today is to show what other analogs we have and what really constitutes a spaceflight analog. So for that, I just want to spend a couple of minutes going through the main hazards of human spaceflight, because again, since we have different analogs, not all are meant to test the same risks of human spaceflight or to test the same type of research. So understanding what are the main hazards of human spaceflight will let us understand what is the best analog for a specific test or for a specific research that we want to conduct. So the first one is distance from Earth. There are three main areas there, which is the communication delay, autonomous medical care, and no emergency evacuation. And this one is particularly important for missions to Mars, not necessarily low Earth orbit or the moon. In low Earth orbit, we have pretty much communications in real time with the space station 24/7. There's an array of satellites. Astronauts pretty much can grab the phone and talk to mission control or their friends without any major implications. When we go to the moon, it's going to be a similar situation. It's just going to be a few seconds of delays, but still medical care could be provided by teleguidance. The second one that is pretty important is, the third one is no emergency evacuation. Both on low Earth orbit and the moon, we have capabilities, and we will have capabilities when we go back to the moon to evacuate someone. We have never had that need on ISS, even though we have been there for more than 20 years. We have never had the need to evacuate someone for a medical reason, but the capability is there. The vehicle could be deorbited in a matter of hours, and they can come back easily to Earth for final medical care. The moon is a similar capability, 3 or 4 days, but they still can come back to Earth. When we go to Mars, as you know, it's going to be likely a 900+ day mission. So there's absolutely no capability, number one, to provide to provide medical care. As you know, the delay is 24 minutes one way. So it's absolutely impossible to provide medical care, especially for a catastrophic medical condition that requires immediate medical care, immediate guidance by a physician on Earth. And the second one, there's of course no emergency evacuation. Once you go, you commit for the full mission, and you cannot come back until 900 days after. So any medical care that needs to be developed for those missions will need to provide medical care for these astronauts. Likely one of them is going to be a physician, but that doesn't assure you that that person is going to have the fresh medical care needed. That person is going to be training for years, probably not current in medicine. And a physician is usually specialized in one area, not all areas of medicine. So regardless, we will need to provide and to develop these tools to render them with the medical care that they need. And of course, there's analogs that allow us to test some of these capabilities, and we'll show which ones are those. The second one that I think most of the analogs share is the hostile closed environment. This one has to do with how the vehicle is designed, specifically from a human interface and a human factors design, which is extremely important, specifically for those long duration missions. The environment, how CO2 levels are contained and maintained in those vehicles. We know that all vehicles have mildly elevated levels of CO2. It's practically impossible to scrub all the CO2 as we do it here on Earth. There's the possibility of toxic exposures. because of the ECLES systems that have to deal with keeping temperatures and other capabilities in the atmosphere. And the third one, the microbiome, that one is extremely important as well, especially on long duration missions. And then how we provide food and nutrition to these folks. Again, low Earth orbit and the moon are pretty straightforward. We have the capability to send a new rocket ship to the space station every month or so to resupply. They even get sometimes ice cream when they're sending some frozen supplies for research or why not they send ice cream. So the capabilities are pretty much endless. But on the mission to Mars, of course, we're extremely constrained from mass, power, and volume perspectives. So any food that you take with yourself, it will need to be the food for the 900 days, right? There's people looking at how can we develop in real time, how can we produce food, or how can we produce other nutrients as needed. But so far, the paradigm is you will have to take with yourself what you need for the entire duration of the mission. The third one, which I think most of the analogs share, is the isolation and confinement. So far, ISS is not a problem. The ISS is a relatively large vehicle, and it's not uncommon that one astronaut doesn't see another astronaut. They could be on one side of the station, the other one on the American side, the other one on the Russian side, and it's not uncommon that they don't see each other during one day. So from that perspective, it is not a big issue on ISS. However, sleep disorders, that's a big issue on low Earth orbit. As you know, the International Space Station orbits every 9 minutes, so that means that every 45 minutes you have daytime, every 45 minutes you have nighttime, and our circadian system is designed to live on a 24-hour rhythm, right? It produces melatonin, it suppresses melatonin, then in the morning it produces cortisol to help you wake up, and this is completely stopped because of the fact that you live in this 45-minute daytime and 45-minute nighttime. And something similar will happen when we go to farther missions. Ultra-gravity fields, there are some analogs actually to test ultra-gravity fields, and I'll show you which ones are. These ones in spaceflight have to do with balance disorders to sensory motor adaptation. All of you have seen how there is a huge team and a platoon of people welcoming the astronauts when they come back to Earth, regardless if it's a Russian vehicle or an American vehicle. And they carry them and then usually just take care of them right away. But imagine when we go back to the moon or to Mars, there's going to be no welcoming committee, right? They're going to be the only ones landing. So one of the key capabilities that we need to develop is making sure that they're able to do something as easy as walk in a straight line and be able to walk normal. And that is a huge implication in spaceflight. The other one is fluid shifts, visual alterations, cardiovascular deconditioning, and as you know, there's also loss of bone and muscle because of spaceflight. And lastly, radiation effects. There is no, thank you. The last one is radiation effects. Of course, there's no analog for humans where we put them in a radiation environment, but there are analogs for other systems that we can take and simulate the radiation that we usually see in space. The next one. So what is a spaceflight analog? What is the definition of a spaceflight analog? Generally, it's any facility, technology, or method that allows for simulations of certain aspects of the spaceflight environment. And we're going to go through some of them, touching specifically the five areas of the 5 risks of human spaceflight that I mentioned. The next one. So these are the 4 or 5 general analog types, the physiological ones. We have isolation and confinement. We have isolated, controlled, confined. And then the second ones are isolated and extreme environments. And these ones are operational environments like Antarctica. Then we have altered gravity and finally space radiation. Next one. So from a physiological analogs perspective, these are the ones that can simulate some of the aspects of living in a zero gravity environment without leaving Earth. The first one, we have centrifuge units. NASA used to have one in Galveston. I'm going to show you another centrifuge that now exists up in Philadelphia, the Nestor Center. This one can simulate the different G loads that the astronauts experience during launch and landing, and even during conditions of aborting the launch. These ones are very important because they help us to understand how they will experience those very unique physiologic insults. The second one is the NVHAB. This one exists in Germany. This one is a very huge facility that has bed rest studies. They can also simulate and change the environment inside, they can actually increase the CO2. They also have a small arm centrifuge. They have MRIs. They have head down tilt. So it's a very comprehensive a facility. And NASA usually conducts research there over several months on a campaign. And this is one of the analogs that potentially could simulate the pathophysiology of SANS, so the spaceflight-associated neuroocular syndrome, by elevating CO2 and having the subjects at a -6 degree head-down tilt. The third one is MEDES, that is in France. That one is also similar to MBHAB, but it's a little bit smaller. And then we have some of the dry immersion capabilities. I'll show you some pictures. The most important one is at IBMP, the Institute of Biomedical Problems in Russia. The next one. This is a typical head-down tilt. Usually we do -6 degrees, and we have them there over long periods of time. There's folks that have been there for 30 days. They have to be like that most of the time. Anybody finds what's wrong with this picture? What's wrong with this head-down tilt? Any guesses? What is it? It's like -6 degrees, but there's something else. The pillow, exactly, the pillow. So this one is head down tilt in the US. And, we are very nice guys. We like to make people comfortable. So whoever was taking care of this subject, maybe he asked for a pillow and oh, sure, just give you a pillow. But what is the problem here? You're basically counteracting the -6 degrees, right? So the results from this project are going to be completely useless. Now, the ones that are extremely good for doing this are the Germans. NBHAV, they do not let them a single second with a pillow, and they need to be actually facing upwards as much as possible. Because the same thing happens if you are rotating your head to the right or to the left, you're constricting the veins on the neck. And one of the things that we want to see is how it affects the head and the circulation in the central nervous system. So it is very important to keep as much as possible these folks, very, very straight. Actually, they make like $50,000 or so for being 30 days on a head-down tilt. So they have also that incentive to be straight. And they can play video games, and why not, on the ceiling. So it's not too bad. The next one. So this is a dry immersion. So this is a pool, basically, with water at ambient temperature. And then this person is in between two layers of fabric. So that person is floating, but it's not in contact with the water. And this allows them to, again, float without having to be constrained by how long they can be in the water. And it's a pretty neat analog that there's not a lot of them, but they are very significant. And this one is in Moscow at the Institute of Biomedical Problems of Russia. The next one. This is one of the physiologic analogs. This is centrifuge at the Nasser Center. So this can simulate pretty much all of the profiles from launch and landing for most of the commercial spaceflight providers. All of the folks that fly on a SpaceX vehicle on the Dragon, they need to go to this center, and it can simulate up to 9 Gs, both on the X profile, that means from the chest to the back, and GZ profile from the head to the bottom. Most of the G loads that you will encounter in spaceflight are GX forces. That's why you see the astronauts that are always laying back, right? So when the vehicle launches, you only see the G loads going from the chest to the back so they don't faint. Most of the fighter pilots are the ones that encounter GC loads, and those are the ones that have the capability of getting G-lock, G-induced loss of consciousness. And those two capabilities can be simulated in this environment. Next one. This is a picture and a blueprint of NVHAB. As you can see, it's a pretty big facility. It's 3,500 square meters of research. They can keep up to 12 subjects for longer periods of time. You can see that they have a PET-CT, MRI, CT scan. They can change the air composition. The more important one here is that they can increase the CO2 to simulate what happens on the vehicles, even ISS. There are standards on how elevated CO2 can be, but there is elevated CO2. And this is pretty significant for spaceflight. They also have psychology laboratory, virtual reality, and they have a human centrifuge. You can see it here in M1. This is a short arm centrifuge. So what you can test here is first you put someone in head down tilt for 2 weeks or a month. Then the physiology of that person is now acclimated to what would be living in space. And then you can put that person on a short arm centrifuge and use that theoretically as a countermeasure for fluid shifting. So you have all of these capabilities in this analog, and it's pretty used by ESA and NASA. The next one. The other one is alter gravity analogs. We have two that traditionally are used. On the left side or your right side, you see the parabolic flights. This is actually zero gravity, real true zero gravity. The downside is that the zero gravity portions are limited to 15 or 20 seconds, depending how good are the pilots on the parabolas. But it's true zero gravity. So you can test mostly how devices would work in a zero gravity environment before you send them into space. In this picture, we're testing a blood collection device that uses microneedles, kind of like the continuous glucose monitors that all of you have seen recently, to collect blood and up to 4 milliliters of blood. So this is the best way to test these devices before we commit to paying $100,000 for flight certification to send them to space. So it's a pass or fail test, basically. And then on the right side, you have one of the largest pool in the world, if not the largest, is the Neutral Buoyancy Lab in Houston. This is where underwater, it's the entire International Space Station. And this is where astronauts train before they go to perform a spacewalk or an EVA. In fact, for a 1 hour spacewalk, they train up to 12 hours. So every hour the day, when you see them in space, they have been spending significant amount of time just training for those specific maneuvers. The next one. Then we have the space radiation analogs. These ones are not for human use, of course. No IRB will allow us to put a human in a radiation environment. But for animal models and tissue chips, this is the best thing that we have on Earth. Space radiation is very unique. We don't have to worry of that here on Earth or even the astronauts on the space station, because we're still protected, as you know, by the magnetosphere of the Earth. But when we go back to the moon or further, we'll be exposed to galactic cosmic radiation. And that is very, very different than the traditional ionizing radiation that all of you are familiar with when you go to a hospital, get a chest X-ray or a CT scan. So the radiation is very difficult to shield, travels pretty much at the speed of light, and you can see every element on the table at its fully ionized form. So it is a very difficult type of radiation to simulate on Earth, and there's only one facility that actually simulates that. It's in Upton, New York, in Long Island. It's called the Brookhaven National Lab, part of the Department of Energy. And NASA owns part of the facility is called the NASA Space Radiation Lab, and they can simulate, in fact, the galactic cosmic radiation. The next one, you'll see a picture of that. So that's on the left side. There's the collider. That's pretty much underground. It's a couple of miles in radius. And what they do is that they inject the different isotopes that compose the galactic cosmic radiation, and then they accelerate them to the speed of light. And then when you see this beam here, you can put mice, you can put rodents or other animals there, or also tissues. And then they get exposed for about 15, 20 minutes at a time to galactic cosmic radiation. It's pretty expensive. 1 hour there is like $15,000, but it's the best thing that we have to simulate space radiation on Earth. The next one. Now we're going to move to isolated, confined, and controlled analogs. Remember that I told you there were two types, right? The ICCs, the isolated, confined, and controlled. And the other ones are the ICE, the isolated, confined, and extreme. And we'll go through those ones as well. So these ones are your traditional government chambers that they could use for research, or some agencies like JAXA, they use their isolation chamber as part of the astronaut selection, which I think it's pretty unique. NASA and ESA, they do not have the astronaut candidates to go to isolation chambers. But I think that is pretty unique, because that's where you see how they really work with others on such conditions. The next one. So this is the one that exists in Russia. This is the NEK. It's a pretty large facility. A few years ago, they conducted a research that all of you are familiar with, the Mars 500 mission, where they had some folks spending day up to 500 days. And there's some pretty interesting results on that one. But as you can see, it's a pretty large facility. It even has a simulation of the Martian surface where they can go and simulate some EVAs. The next one. This is the Mars 500 mission. It was between 2010 and 2011. These are the folks that went on that mission. And one of the very unique things here that most of the other analogs lack is that you're seeing here a very diverse crew crew composition, right? I mean, they're all men, yes, but you can see that they're from different countries, from China, from France, from Russia, from Italy. So this is something very unique that we absolutely need to encourage to all the analogs to have people from different countries, different cultures, different demographics, different traditions, so that we can understand how they will work as a team. Because still, the team dynamics and team composition is one of the two highest priority areas in human spaceflight for deep space missions. So this was a very good start to get those crews under the same conditions. The next one. This is the Japanese analog. This is where they train their astronauts. They don't use it that much for research, but it is used constantly to have their astronauts before they get fully selected. That one is pretty interesting. It has like a bank vault there, so it's pretty unique. The next one. You can go back. There's the HERA, the Human Exploration Research Analog at NASA. This is a facility that is used to conduct 30 or 45-day missions. They simulate a long duration mission either to Mars or other significant location. Next one. I was fortunate enough to be in one of those missions in 2016 in the HERA 30. HERA 11, it was Campaign 3, Mission 3. It's me on the left a couple of pounds ago and no mustache, but that's me. The next one. Then we're going to go to isolated, control, and extreme analogs. What makes the difference in these ones is that these ones are fully operational, right? These are not simulated missions. These ones are people working there, but they're in an absolutely extreme environment. So these people are not selected as research subjects. These people are selected as employees of these different stations. And then we have the option and the capability to offer research to them, and then they engage. And these ones are some of the most powerful analogs that we have because it's, again, an operational environment. People know that it's their job to be there, just like astronauts will go and it's going to be their job. But on the other side, it's a little bit more difficult to access these environments because, again, they are employees. The next one, we're going to go through those. So this is EUrquieta and Alert. These are operational stations. These ones are all the way up in Canada. And it's pretty close to Greenland. And Shona, you can correct me, but I think someone told me that usually someone needs to go there to make sure that the Canadian flag is there, because Greenland likes to put there's a little piece of land there that it's still discussed between Canada and Greenland. So it's yeah. There you go. Yeah. So it's a very isolated place, and folks have to be there in literally in the middle of nowhere. The next one. This is Mars Houghton. This is in Devon Island. It's part of the Queen Elizabeth Islands. Again, pretty close to Greenland. And NASA did a study here like 10 years ago. And again, it's extremely, extremely isolated. You usually think isolation in Antarctica, but if you look at these places, are probably as isolated, or if not more than the Antarctic stations. The next one. Then we have Antarctica. This is, anybody knows what station is this? It's more like a city, right? It's McMurdo, yeah. So it's when people think about this as an analog, I mean, it's more like a city. It has thousands or tens of thousands of people during the summer. So they have their own hospital, they have nurses, they have a pharmacy, they have a bar, they have stores, and they have the capability of evacuation at any moment, 24/7, 365 days a week. So yeah, it's good to study some items, but the fact that it's too big, it doesn't make it good for spaceflight, right? We're thinking of a vehicle that is going to carry 4 people. So what can you learn from 10,000 people working together could extrapolate to a population of 4, right? So that's one of the downsides of this mission, of these analogs. The next one, that is at night. It's pretty neat picture. But again, it's a very large city. The next one. One of the new ones that I want to cover sometime today is the Australian Antarctic Division. They have some of the most isolated stations in the world. And these are way smaller in size compared to what you traditionally see on the NSF stations like McMurdo. The stations during the winter over, which is 9 months, they start usually in February because that's the southern winter. They are fully isolated for 9 months, and there's no capability of evacuation. something happens there, they're stuck and committed for 9 months. And they have a single physician model. This person has to take care of him or herself and then the rest of the crew. So these ones are very, very unique and more responsive to what we need for human spaceflight. The next one. So these are some of the stations. They have Mawson, Davis, Casey, and also Macquarie Island. So there's 3 Antarctic sites, 1 subantarctic site with coordinated remote medical systems at Hobart in Tasmania, the island that you see up there. That is where usually they provide the telemedicine guidance to these different stations. But again, if you're stuck for 9 months, you have to do what you have to do. And they also have an integrated digital EMR, emergency medical records. Next one. So what is the general environment on these stations? So I was telling you there's 9 months of no evacuation and resupply capability. Remember what we were saying about missions to Mars, right? 900 days, no resupply. So they encounter similar issues. Of course, it's shorter periods of time, but this is, again, full isolation. Not even the space station, when you see that they go for a year. I was telling you that every month we have the capability of sending them food or supplies or care packages. That is not the case in these stations. The only access is between November and February. It's by ship and plane. And then, theoretically there could be an airdrop, but it's that isolated that that's usually not an option. The stations are located just above sea level, 15 to 37 meters, which is also very important. If we think of the South Pole, that station is like 10,000 feet, which is not what we have on the space station. Most vehicles are pressurized at 14.7 psi, which is sea level. So having stations that are as close as possible to sea level, that's also very important from a human physiology perspective. There are small stations, close to 20 during the winter over versus 10,000 on Antarctica, so very different and more similar to what we need for spaceflight. And what is very unique is the medical model. There's 1 physician at each of the stations that has been trained to do root canals, to do whatever surgery is needed, provide family care, psychological care, because that's really the only person in the station. And that is, again, at the beginning I was saying that's what we need for a mission to Mars. It's going to be a single person, probably less trained than this physician, because this physician, that's his or her job, right? Every day of the year. But the astronaut, his or her job, yes, he's a physician, but most of his job is going to be, his or her job is going to be dependent on what to do specifically for the mission, not necessarily as a physician. Physician is a second or tertiary action. And then evacuation is not an option. Next one. So what is the population composition? Usually between 20 and 70 years old. Most of them are males, 5-to-1 ratio. There's stringent medical and psychological screening, such as we have with professional astronauts. The winter population consists mainly of tradespeople and junior researchers. In this type of environment, you have to cross-train the people, just like in space. For example, the carpenter needs to know how to cook, needs to know how to help the physician, needs to know how to do research. So everybody needs to be cross-trained, and that also helps to have a better team composition and team dynamics, because everybody knows what the other person has to do in his or her job. So that's something very, very unique of these capabilities. The next one. This is the Casey station. This, as you can see, compared to McMurdo, it's pretty small. The next one. Davis station, also pretty small, and during the winter over there, even smaller. Next one. This is Mawson station. This is one of the smallest ones. It's just like a camp, like a mining camp, pretty similar to a mining camp. The next one. Medical support. It's one super generalist. It's just a physician that has to take care of everything, again, including root canals or any dental care, which is not that uncommon in these situations. Lay population receives fairly extensive first responder care and training, so they can help the physician if needed. I was telling you there's cross training. The technologies are leveraged for autonomous remote care, which is, again, what we will need for a mission to Mars. Integrated EMR, that's why everybody can see each other's medical records if needed. And there's some capabilities for radiology if needed. Next one. These are some of the lab capabilities. We don't have to go into detail, but they have ultrasound, they have dental radiography, and most of the things that we need. In spaceflight, we will not even have the capability to have all of this, right? In spaceflight, probably ultrasound is the only thing that we will be able to use. Number one, because it's smaller, it doesn't use a lot of power, but also because it doesn't produce radiation, right? The last thing that you want to do is have an astronaut that is going to be exposed to pretty much a lifetime exposure in a single mission, and then you keep giving him or her radiation. The next one. Comparison to the NSF stations, I think we covered most of these. The next one. And, this is something that could happen, right? This is Leonid Rogozov. He was in one of the Russian stations in the 90s. He was the only physician, and he had to remove his own appendix. He did it with local anesthesia, a little mirror, and, I mean, that's as extreme as it gets, right? That's why these environments are very relevant. Now, a lot of people learn from this, and then in Antarctica, the physicians that have to stay there during the winter over, they actually have a prophylactic appendectomy. They remove the appendix before they go to the 9-month isolation. The last thing that you want is having a crew of 10 people fully isolated for 9 months, and your doctor gets appendicitis, right? That wouldn't be a good day. So I think this is the last slide. Yeah, if you have any questions, please feel free to send me an email, or if you have any questions. Thank you.
We do have time for a couple of questions from the audience here. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just curious looking at your slides about the different ICE environments. A lot of people here are involved in some of these more private analogs, and I'm just curious why some of those weren't listed and what your perspective is on, maybe more funded or more organized things like McMurdo or different research stations, as opposed to things like MDRS or HICES or different places like this.
Yeah, the reason why these ones are mentioned, because these ones can conduct systematic and prospective research, where you are looking at, in the case, for example, the hair, right? You're looking at N of 4 missions a year. You're looking at N of 16 that are going to do exactly the same research, right? So it's very controlled. So when you want to publish something, or you're expecting that your research are going to be used by the astronauts, you need a number that is statistically significant to produce evidence, either on the positive or negative side of things, right? Negative data is very, very useful as well. So these are the ones that are more likely to produce those type of data sets as needed. It's definitely not a full list, but those are the ones that traditionally and historically have been able to produce those data sets.
Let's see, one more. Here we go.
Following up on Ben's question, so a lot of the stations you showed are isolation stations, and we sort of at the Mars Society have the philosophy of at MDRS, we're not an isolation station. We don't think that when we get to Mars, we're going to be sitting in the hab for a year. We're actually going to go explore. And so we kind of structure the program that way. What's your reaction to that? And do you have any advice for us?
No, I think that's absolutely needed. There's actually a couple efforts. I mean, even here, right? They have the Mars Yard. In Texas, Texas A&M is building a new facility that has a Mars and a lunar yard. So I think that's been a gap. You're exactly right. Most people have been looking at isolation and confinement. But then what are you going to do when you land, right? Or even the other scenario, what are you going to do if you need an EVA during the mission to, say, fix something in the vehicle where you will have to do it by yourself? So I think it's very useful. That has been traditionally a gap. So I think that'll be pretty good for the community. Yeah. So in a lot of these analogs, you just get an N of 1, like a one-off, and I think that's great for a pilot or stuff like that. But if you're gonna develop an analog that has the capability of testing EVAs or lunar landing or Mars landing, I think getting a sample size that then you can make a decision or a conclusion about that, trying to replicate that specific project in as much people as you can throughout multiple missions, I think that would be very useful.
All right, thank you, everyone. Thank Dr. Manuel again.